October 27, 1944, Vosges Mountains, France. The forest was silent, except for the crack of distant rifles. Dawn mist clung to the pine branches, dripping onto helmets as Private George Sakato of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team inched forward. His boots squelched in mud, the smell of wet earth mixed with the acrid bite of cordite from the night's artillery barrage. Somewhere ahead, faint voices cried out in desperation. Americans cut off, hungry and out of ammunition. They were the 1st Battalion, 141st Infantry, already being called the Lost Battalion. Reports said 275 men were trapped behind German lines, their position shrinking every hour. Commanders insisted they must be saved. For Sakato and his fellow Nisei, second-generation Japanese Americans, the order was clear: advance no matter the cost. Few could imagine how many would not return. In the autumn of 1944, German officers in Army Group G believed the Vosges Mountains favored their defense. Staff notes from September dismissed American forces as uncoordinated and fragile. By October, the Germans had surrounded the 1st Battalion of the 141st Regiment near Bifontaine. Elements of the German 198th Infantry Division occupied ridgelines with interlocking MG-42 nests, while mortars rained onto forest trails. The steep terrain strangled American armor. Sherman tanks bogged down on mud paths too narrow for maneuver. To German commanders, the encircled battalion was already finished. They assumed no relief force could break through dense pine and entrenched positions. Yet this arrogance blinded them to the coming assault. What they could not know was that General John Dahlquist had issued orders to one of the most battle-hardened units in the theater, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and the men he sent forward carried not just rifles, but the weight of prejudice and doubt from their own country. The 1st Battalion of the 141st Infantry pushed too far forward on October 24, 1944, without flank protection. Within hours, German forces enveloped their lines. Radio operators sent frantic messages. Rations were exhausted, ammunition was nearly gone, and men were collapsing from exhaustion and cold. Reports noted 275 soldiers cut off. German strength in the sector exceeded 6,000 men, with artillery batteries covering every likely escape route. Attempts at resupply failed. Parachuted crates landed in German hands. U.S. artillery tried to carve open corridors, but counterfire silenced the batteries. Soldiers trapped in the forest rationed a few remaining crackers, scribbled letters home, and waited for relief. Some believed it would never come. At 7th Army headquarters, urgency grew. If the battalion was lost, the cost would be political as well as tactical. But relief meant sending men into terrain where even experienced German veterans hesitated to advance. That order fell on the 442nd. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team had already carved a reputation in Italy and France. Composed mostly of Nisei, sons of Japanese immigrants, it stood as both proof of loyalty and a paradox. Many of their families were confined behind barbed wire in internment camps back home, branded potential enemies by the same government they now fought for. By October 1944, the unit had suffered more than 800 casualties liberating Bruyères. Yet General Dahlquist ordered them forward again toward Bifontaine. Officers protested, but orders stood. Armed with M1 Garand rifles, bar automatic weapons, and light 60mm mortars, the regiment moved through knee-deep mud and rain, climbing ridges where mules slipped and radios failed. Every soldier knew the cost could be catastrophic. Still, they advanced, not only to rescue fellow Americans, but to prove beyond doubt that loyalty was written in blood, not ancestry. Ahead lay German machine guns, barbed wire, and a forest turned into a fortress. The Vosges Mountains turned logistics into torture. Dense forests blocked air support. Mud swallowed vehicles and icy rain ruined maps and soaked uniforms. Engineers cut rough trails, while jeeps loaded with ammunition overturned on steep inclines. Stretcher teams carried the wounded on their backs for miles. German snipers fired from treetops, while mortars exploded among pines, splintering trunks into deadly shrapnel. Between October 27 and 29, the 442nd advanced only a few hundred yards each day, leaving more than 600 casualties behind. Survivors recalled the eerie sound of MG-42's shredding branches, filling the air with smoke and needles. "We didn't retreat," one Nisei veteran later said. We just kept crawling forward. The advance became a brutal test of willpower rather than firepower. By the third day, exhaustion showed on every face. Yet morale remained anchored by one fact: somewhere ahead, fellow Americans were dying. That conviction pulled them through the mud toward a hill, soon to be named in blood. October 30th brought the turning point. The 3rd Battalion of the 442nd was ordered. To seize a ridge locals had begun calling Suicide Hill, German. Positions were entrenched with overlapping machine gun. Fire and mortars zeroed on every slope. At dawn, officers gave the command to fix bayonets. Men charged uphill through fog and smoke, shouting as grenades burst among trees. Combat collapsed into close-quarters fighting. Rifles fired at point-blank range, bayonets clashed, and grenades cleared bunkers. Private George Sakato, after losing close friends, charged alone into a German position, killing and capturing dozens before rallying his platoon. For his actions, he would later receive the Medal of Honor. By nightfall, German resistance cracked. Soldiers of the 442nd burst through to the 141st's perimeter. Of the original 275 men of the Lost Battalion, only 211 stumbled out alive, gaunt, exhausted but free. For the rescued men, it was salvation. For the Nisei, it was victory carved from sacrifice. Relief came at a staggering price. In just 5 days of fighting, the 442nd suffered more than 800 casualties, killed, wounded or missing, compared to the 200 men rescued. Historians later calculated one of the highest casualty for rescue ratios in U.S. history. Soldiers described the forest floor littered with helmets, rifles, and the fresh graves of friends buried under pine branches. Survivor's guilt haunted many Nisei veterans. One recalled, "We saved them, but we lost so many of our own. Sometimes I wondered if it was worth it." The psychological burden was heavy. Men who had fought for recognition now carried scars invisible to others. Yet their discipline never wavered. The regiment marched out of the Vosges, battered but unbroken. For commanders, the mission was proof of success. For soldiers, it was a haunting memory. And for the Germans, it was a shocking revelation. These men they had dismissed had turned the forest into a proving ground. Captured German officers expressed disbelief at the 442nd's tenacity. Many had assumed these troops were colonial auxiliaries, expecting them to break under attrition. Instead, German intelligence underestimated their strength and cohesion. Reports later admitted the regiment advanced, despite untenable losses, pushing through ground where seasoned Wehrmacht veterans had faltered. The effect was not just tactical, but psychological. The realization that American forces could field units willing to absorb devastating casualties for a principle. In the aftermath, German survivors described the relentless attacks as un-American in ferocity, a label that revealed their surprise more than their contempt. That shock rippled through the sector, shaking assumptions that the forest would hold indefinitely. But back in Washington, the reception was different. The men who had stunned German officers would soon return to face not applause but silence and suspicion from their own countrymen. Recognition, if it came at all, would take decades. Despite their unmatched bravery, the Nisei of the 442nd returned to a country still divided by prejudice. Many came back to families confined in internment camps, surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. Medals and commendations were slow to arrive. Initially, only one Medal of Honor was awarded. In the following decades, historians and veterans pushed for review. In the 1990s, 20 Distinguished Service Crosses were upgraded to Medals of Honor. On June 21, 2000, President Bill Clinton presented the awards, declaring their heroism had gone unrecognized for too long because of prejudice. For aging veterans, the ceremony was both vindication and a reminder of injustice endured. They had fought for a flag that doubted them and buried brothers under foreign soil to prove their loyalty. Recognition came, but decades too late. For many, the silence in 1945 was louder than the applause in 2000. Yet the record now bore their sacrifice in indelible ink. The rescue of the Lost Battalion became the defining moment of the 442nd's history. By war's end, the regiment had earned over 18,000 individual decorations, including 21 Medals of Honor and 9,486 Purple Hearts, making it the most decorated unit of its size in U.S. military history. Numbers told part of the story, but the true legacy lay in the paradox they embodied. Soldiers who fought harder than anyone, even as their own government questioned their loyalty. The Vosges campaign revealed not only tactical bravery, but also the hypocrisy of wartime America. The Nisei rescued comrades who later admitted they had never before served alongside Japanese Americans. That moment forged bonds transcending prejudice. Today, memorials stand in Texas, Hawaii, and France marking the sacrifice. Survivors, speaking decades later, often recalled the smell of the forest, the faces of lost friends, and the silence after gunfire ceased. The battle proved that courage could overcome doubt, but it also left the enduring lesson that freedom abroad means little if justice is denied at home.